Greetings and welcome to En Route 23. I'm Miss Roots.
And I'm Nathan Israel. Greetings and good evening.
Really happy to be here this evening. I want to start off by saying that we are encouraging you to join in the discussion. It's important that you are part of the discussion. So whether you want to be involved in the live chat facility, so that's typing within the chat area, or selecting the link that I'll send into the chat area, where you can also be part of the online studio and actively join in verbally with what we're discussing this evening. This evening, we actually have a really interesting topic.
Yes, the dynamics of this topic here is do you want to put the bar on the bottom? Thank you. There we go. So here we be going. So we're talking about a critical look at slavery. So obviously, when most people look at slavery, we're going to most people pigeonhole a certain area. We're going extensive now on a whole global scale on this one. So as Miss Root said, please chime in. And once you see us get into the notion, you'll see where we're going with the whole slavery thing. So just bear that in mind, guys. So yeah, the links are on the bottom to join in on the discussion. In the chat as well, it's going to be posted up on YouTube right now, well, in a moment, for you to join in on StreamYard and YouTube itself. And if you want to get involved and engaged, do your most.
Brilliant. I also want to add that we do have a website. We've got lots going on. I've just changed the banner at the bottom. Okay.
That's actually a lot easier. I just noticed.
Yeah, so the website is enroute23.com. We also have En Route presence across all social media platforms. So that includes Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I will add that we are currently building our footage and content across social media platforms, but by all means, follow us and see what we get up to. If you'd like to email us, you can get hold of us on contact@enroute23.com. Reach us directly if you want to be part of this, or you have any recommendations, feedback, comments, anything. Feel free to contact us. And also, I'm encouraging you guys to subscribe, like, share, comment, so we can get some feedback.
And also donate so we can continue with our research, because there's a lot of resources out there that's available. But a lot of this information that we are trying to get a hold of here, it does not come at a free cost. Yes, there are PDFs of some of the things in libraries and that what we're trying to establish with the research. I'm going to put together, if anything, a whole list of things that we can have and all reference materials for us to research on. But please, if you are willing to donate and want to support this cause, which is going to be the heaviest cause that's going to happen at this moment, please do. Just go onto the website again, www.enroute23.com.
Indeed. Okay, so we've got our resident speaker here. Yeah, he's becoming a regular. Yeah, Corey. Yeah, very diligent. I'm going to bring him up onto the screen, welcome him for this evening, and then we'll get into this evening's discussion. So, good evening, Corey.
I love this now, you know. I start doing it, we can understand what you're.
For those who know,
the piece.
But now we've got this one now.
Then you can do the whole.
I learned this one last week from Corey, so I know this means water, right?
Yeah.
And this means yes, and this means no.
And then this one, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
so yeah,
I remember just before we start, I remember when I was working at my cousin's place, and it was New Year, and it was so loud. And it's funny enough, the woman that came to me, she had a hearing aid. So I said, what is it? Yeah, Happy New Year. And she understood, and she's like, "Oh, you know sign language?" I said, "No, I just know to say it, because I can't, I know you can't hear me." And she's like, "Oh, well done." Like, so yeah, guys, that's another language that I think we need to get into as well, learning sign.
Anyway, let's not get too far off topic. It's all interesting. Let's go. So this evening's conversation, the reason why we even the reason why we even decided to go with this topic is because for those who chimed in last week, you will know that we naturally organically went into this conversation about slavery, right?
Mhm.
So last week's topic was what was last week's topic?
It was New Year.
Oh,
and
it's
solstice.
no, critical look at Christmas and the New Year.
That was it. And for some
And there's a
reason,
few, you know,
Go
a
on.
good thing about that, yeah, I think we should relay a few things that we spoke about, which related to the slavery part in the workforce and this and that. But let's go.
Yeah.
Corey, do you want to hit home first?
You might, sorry,
Wanna go
on this topic or last week. This
No,
topic.
let's go with this week. I just felt it was necessary to explain why we decided to take a critical look at slavery, and that is because at the latter end of last week's conversation, which was about Christmas, the New Year, and conforming to these festivities, we naturally, organically, went into a conversation about slavery. So we actually said, okay, next week we'll have an in-depth conversation about slavery. So I feel let's just jump into that. I want to start off by saying that mainstream common knowledge is of the transatlantic slave trade, right? So this is the slave trade that we're taught about in school, and the slave trade that amongst the Black community we kind of talk about most, and we're victims of slavery. We're aware that we were enslaved for the 500 years, and taken from the continent of Africa, taken to the islands, North America, and forced into labor. And the abolishment, I suppose, brings about some type of freedom, and so we feel now that we are trying to get over that trauma, right? Nathan likes to speak a lot about post-traumatic slave syndrome. So there are issues that have impacted the Black community because of the traumatic events that took place in the slave trade. So that's the common narrative, right? We were chained, we were whipped, we were violated, split up from our families, mother tongue taken away, lost how to do our spiritual practices, lost identity. The Willie Lynch trip, we hate each other, redskins against dark skins, brothers against sisters, the crabs in the barrel and all of that, right? So we're a part of it. I don't need to go into too much more detail, but I think that's a great place to start, because that's the common consensus, right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
No, Miss Reeds, yeah, you smashed it now. You've now basically pinpointed where we're going to touch down on.
Okay. Go on. Do you want to go first?
No, you go.
So you hit home on some really interesting points there, definitely. I think the general narrative, that is definitely the general narrative, and no one would be persecuted and would be forgiven for not having the time to look into it a bit more in depth, not just slavery, but into one's own heritage and lineage, to find the good in there, because we don't really have much time, and I think the trauma associated with it often discourages most people from wanting to really go back into that place, because it is emotionally traumatic. And I think that we talk about it a lot as if it's something in the past. No, we describe it as something in the past, but we actually conceive it and are experiencing it very much so in the present. In many ways, one of the ways that we're doing that is by reliving and having to reconcile and rationalize a lot of the things that you just mentioned regarding enslavement and brutality, and genocide, I would say, cultural, ethnic, and physical genocide. And so most people aren't aware that genocide is not always a physical aggression form. Paper genocide exists, for example, as well as cultural genocide also. And arguably, those forms of genocide are actually the most powerful, because people will always fight for their home and fight for their place if they know who they are. And so once you remove and detach them from something to fight for, and they did not know what to fight for, or where they're from, or what they're connected to, then it makes it much easier to essentially provide new ways of thinking, new indoctrination, and new identity. And so I just want to touch base on these events happened in the past, but for the Black community, they're very much present, and they're present in the psychology of whenever we have to consider or we're faced with this idea, we feel it a lot. And there's a lot of trauma tied up into that, a lot of trauma bindings up into that. So there's a psychological, emotional aspect of it, of having to reconcile and process those things whenever we have to discuss them. And then there's also another part of that where, if you look at sectors in society, most sectors in society are discriminating right now, and have a lot of legacy from those eras, you could say. And so if you look at all the primary social sectors in society right now, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's work, social, ethnic, for example, religious and spiritual. I could go into the draft for extras, but in every primary sector of society that's deemed to be required for a successful community, people of color are often caught in a discrimination trap. And this trap is really, it's implicit a lot of the time nowadays. It's not so explicit, and it's so dangerous because of that. Some of the content that I've been studying and looking up, preparing for this talk, one of the comments one of the guys made is about how psychology and psychoanalytic studies, and the very foundation of that, came from a place where those individuals were, in many cases, taking part in racialization and discrimination. And also the idea that when you go, say, to a therapist, often the discussion and the language used in therapy is about resolving an individual's internal issues. And so if I go to therapy, for example, they would discuss with me my issues, how I personally felt and responded to situations or events. But what we weren't really able to discuss is the causality so much of those things if they're not internalized. So, for example, when a person of, well, first of all, race often isn't allowed to be brought up in a medical setting, or even in a psychological setting. And this is not me saying this, although I'm aware of that. These are Black psychologists that have gone into the field that are also trying to advocate now for a better understanding and also a inclusive perspective, rather than Black people being an afterthought. We'll add that onto the end, the racialized aspect.
Yeah, keep going, bro. You got this.
The reason why this is important is because if somebody who's been persecuted goes into a therapist, they may get coping mechanisms for the trauma and the discrimination and the events that are hurting them, but rarely will they get resolution to actually resolve the events that are hurting them. If they cannot abstract themselves or remove themselves from that environment. So if we're in an environment where we are being persecuted or being discriminated against, that leaves us in a very bad situation, because you only have so many coping mechanisms. If somebody, say, jabbing you in the face, you might be told, okay, bob and weave, and that, you know what I mean, duck around, bob and weave, wear a head guard, do all these other things. But if you have to go back into that environment where daily you're going to get that jab in the face, regardless of the coping mechanisms, that's going to have an impact. And what we need to address is the jabbing in itself, rather than as well as the protection from the jabbing while it's continuing. And at the moment, the way it's often looked at is, well, how can you, i.e. the discriminated or minoritized groups, how can you guys deal with that? When actually in order for us to deal with this, it's not just the Black community that need to be involved. There has to be acknowledgement and some education also from all communities. That's key. And then not only is it key, I think it's empowering to all communities too. I do think that, and from my experience, many people who have different ethnic identification or origins actually don't want to be racist, most of them. Some of them aren't racist, of course. And there's an issue regarding us not having the language and the mechanisms to discuss race in a way which doesn't provoke discomfort. And so what often happens is let's say, for example, a Black person wants to talk about an event of brutality to somebody who's not Black. Often the not Black person can be quite, not offended, but can maybe feel some guilt, some shame, and many other not great emotions. Of course, the person who is explaining that may have been them who suffered it or their family. And so they have suffered often the greatest impact. But often when the person who's suffered, them sharing their suffering in our day and age causes other people to trigger and react. And many times recoil, because the very exposure to perceiving those events that have happened are traumatic for somebody to hear. What's not being acknowledged that it is traumatic, but we have to identify that it's in no way comparable to living the event yourself. And at the moment, we're kind of caught in that dichotomy where nobody wants to hear bad news and nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news. But in order for us to resolve this and get to a place of good, we're going to have to come through the bad. And so I'm going to summarize there. There are more than two, but one aspect is the legacy of the emotional psychological impact of discussing these things, which in many cases are nowhere near the full picture, nowhere near at all. They're often the traumatized aspects of it. And the other element of that is racial fragility, I'm calling it, although it can be called white fragility in other areas and Black fragility in other areas, depending. And that racial fragility is a mechanism which essentially reacts in such a way which prevents discussing the topic and getting resolution. And the strange thing is that there are many times when you talk to somebody of color.
Can you say that term that you said, fragility?
Racial fragility.
Sorry, Corey, can you say that thing about fragility again one more time?
Oh, what is it? Okay, well,
racial fragility. No, say it again one more time.
Racial fragility is a mechanism.
That, bro, that's a sick one.
Okay, well, racial fragility is a mechanism which reinforces the very presence of racism by deflecting, being guarded, and refusing to acknowledge the event that's happened, often because the conversation in itself is traumatic. And so, like we mentioned earlier on, where if I've just got beaten up by a mob of people because of racialized reasons, and I'll go to say a good white person who's not very familiar with any of this, and I try and talk to them about that, they're gonna react, and they're gonna feel shame, they're gonna feel bad, they're probably gonna wonder whether I think they're like that also, and many other negative emotions, and it's sad on two levels. One, because as a person who suffered the crime itself, I would have to reassure this individual, and also the individual would want to help, but they're also bound by their own emotional response. And again, hearing about an event is not the same as living through that event. And so it'll be a bit like people not wanting to know the suffering that's happening in Palestine because it's too traumatic, and allowing their trauma to prevent them from acknowledging what's happening and being willing to participate in helping that and other events. We're in a situation where somebody who's lived through that has suffered greatly. And so my exposure to that event, for example, hearing about it, is in no way comparable to somebody who's lived through it. And so I think there's quite a few things there. I think that if we was able to discuss slavery holistically, it would definitely help. But if you notice the pattern of education on slavery is often about the brutality aspects. It's a very degrading, demeaning, and demoting narrative that's often presented. Young people are in school essentially being what could be classified as common assault, which is basically a form when somebody feels threatened or at risk or in danger, or has to experience the risk, danger, or harm that's come to a loved one or ancestor. And so if somebody tells me that my father and mother has just been hurt, I'm going to feel that. Yeah, it's a known thing. And if I believe that my mother, father, aunt, uncle, children, etc., are about to be hurt again, an individual would feel that. And if you're present in the same environment, for example, and somebody threatens somebody that you're with, it's classed as common assault, because the threat that's being present is affecting you directly. It's an acknowledged and known thing. In law, this is. What we don't acknowledge is that when we're in an education setting and we're discussing these things with children that have not got a complete rounded view of the world. And I think previously the ignorance of not having all that information was probably better than having overload of information, which many of it needs to be filtered through, as today with social media and internet, for example, would have been a safer option. In the same way as when they separate boys and girls through sex education, if we was to continue teaching it like this, the only way we could ensure it was to be safe would be to segregate people. Because when you talk about females in sex education, for example, some of those things they may be embarrassed about, they may be unsure about, and it's a sensitive subject, especially if they're learning about it themselves. And same goes for boys too. So they separate them because they're aware that intersecting those two lessons would cause a lot of problems. Often it's projected that most problems would come for the females. I think that's mainly because of how masculinity works in being extrovert and overt. But inside, believe it or not, the men are going to be feeling funky too. They are. There's going to be masking it probably more so. There would be. That's the reality of it. And so, if we was to talk about slavery, where we are, arguably, you'd say, well, if you're going to talk about a subject which we know is going to cause emotional trauma to a specific group, but not another group, the other group may feel guilt or shame about it separately, then maybe those groups may need to be separated in the same way they are, and for the same reasons they're separated in sexual education. I'm not saying we should do that. What I'm saying is that the whole concept and teaching of slavery truly needs to be reformed, and so does so-called Black history. And I think the way to reform Black history is just to have human history.
Can I chime in there, please?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so there's a few things we've said. So you're talking about education now. So my ears just go bling when I hear the word education and practices in the classroom, right? So one of the things I want to first of all kind of emphasize, acknowledge, and shout out is that I went around in 2012 and I asked people what do they know about Black history prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And I could not believe the void in knowledge. And this is Black people, right? Yeah. I'm asking Black people, what do you know about yourself before the transatlantic slave trade? And they didn't know. In fact, they were like, for real? I don't know what we were doing before slavery. And to me, this was just like astonishing. I'd be telling them, you were kings and queens, you were gods and goddesses, you had your own civilizations. Like, why do you think they wanted the land? Why do you think that land was invaded? There must have been something special there, right? So just triggering those critical caps, right? And also, I want to mention that in the UK, as you know, people who teach education here are predominantly white people, right? Mm-hmm. So you have white history teachers teaching the transatlantic slave trade, right? Now, so now again, there's an issue there, right? Because, in my experience, these are predominantly white men as well, not even white women. So there's a whole tone to the way that curriculum, that module is delivered. And I was in one of those classes. I took history, and it was part of the curriculum for them to teach the transatlantic slave trade. And I remember how I felt, you know, when the picture of us on a boat, all crammed in the boat, you know, all lined up one by one, and me having to connect and know that that's my ancestors that were packed up in those boats. And I remember my peers kind of like feeling awkward, and, you know, it's, the whole thing needs a reform, like you say. I don't know what the solution is, but all I know is the way it's done presently is not conducive to our self-actualization, if you like, our growth, our positive image, our proud to be who we are. It's very demeaning, and it is not conducive to young
education.
people feeling positive about themselves. You're supposed to go through the education system, knowing who you are, feeling positive about yourself, ready for adulthood. That's not happening, right? Yeah, I know you had to have it a few times there, so I'll let you.
I think that what you mentioned there about feeling awkward in the class, that trauma, I mean, that happens to everybody, like pretty much everybody that happens to. And I think that if you look at that situation, they wouldn't do that in sex education, and they wouldn't do that for many other topics too. And so the question really should be is why and how well, first of all, why are the Black community allowing this trauma to be done upon their children in that fashion? So not saying we shouldn't be teaching about it. Like you said, if there was a white male, for example, teaching females about sex, well, that happens at times. Not like, whoa, we don't have a female teaching us. That perfectly, and often that is the case, and vice versa. And this topic here, I would say, arguably, is a lot more traumatic than teaching children about a very natural coming of age process. And that there was like, again, I think most Black people have gone through that would be like, oh, yeah, I remember that too. And the feelings and emotions that I had were not pleasant. And if those feelings and emotions came about because of other comments that were made, like, I don't know, being called an N-word, or being called even the B word, for example, like in a gender sense, or other slanders, that would be offensive. And what I think you've hit the point on there is that the lesson itself is offensive. It's offensive on so many levels, but for some reason we've allowed it to just be, because we're kind of like, well, it's got to be taught at some point, so it's better that they know some of it than don't know some of it. But the problem then is that there are a couple of things. We may have all had teachers that people can be biased about knowing it. The teachers that are good teachers, the teachers that are bad teachers, and whether they're good or bad, as we've seen with evidence, even locally in Birmingham, for example, with the Professor Gilbert's studies and others, implicit bias is a real big problem. It's a really big problem. So you've got a situation where there are teachers that have implicit bias, some of them with explicit bias, teaching a topic that's so racially charged. And arguably, if children were traumatized in that manner for other lessons, parents would be kicking up. I can guarantee that if it was a white slavery lesson, the parents would be like, they'd be like, what's going on here? My child came and she was crying. I'm not sure if you're aware of Jane Elliott's work, for example. Have you ever seen Jane Elliott in action?
No, I haven't. Me personally, no.
Have you seen Jane Elliott in action? Okay,
No.
well, I will go through it. Now, don't get me wrong, Jane Elliott is a badass and she's hardcore. And so I do think the measures that she uses are extreme. I do think the narrative can be useful, though. I can't help but feel for the students that are in the class, because they're getting, it's emotionally traumatic. Essentially,
is that the lady with the brown eyes, blue eyes?
Yeah. And she segregates them based on eye color.
I know.
Oh no, that's what's her name?
Jane Elliott.
Yeah.
What's her name again? Sorry.
Jane.
Oh Elliott. Yeah, Jane Elliott. Yeah, she smashed it. Yeah. Go on,
So
carry on. Sorry.
she segregates them on eye color, which again, just to clarify, the notion of race is only a couple of 100 years old. The way we use it today, it was from a German anthropologist that coined the current models of race. And yes, they tried to sort of backdate it to sort of the early civilization, which is which they deemed to be Egypt, and then obviously Greece and so on. But the actual categorizations themselves they utilized were from modern time, very recent actually, sort of, and technically post, kind of towards the end of the slave era, in some cases, but post the Black slave era, officially. Although just because something's in law doesn't mean that it's being enacted. Just to clarify, yeah, laws were made. It took a while for everybody to catch up with the actual practice of those suggestions. So the trauma, I would say that the Black community needs to really speak up and acknowledge actually that this is offensive. And it's offensive because it's not holistic. It definitely not. So there are things you can talk about Napoleon. And so if they taught European history, but they only taught the bad things, that would be a problem. We don't only hear about King Henry VIII's craziness with his wives. We also hear about all the great things that happened for the British monarchy too. And that's important. The term is even called Great Britain, for example, and so on. So we hear a lot of good, and we do hear some of the bad. Don't get me wrong, a couple of the bad, but even the bad is put into nursery rhyme. If you notice that, it's put into a very palatable form where it's almost kind of like giggleable, and can be taught to a child in a way. Oh, like what's the rhyme going now? Divorced, beheaded, and died. Divorced, beheaded, and died, and like a little whole fun rhyme about it. And if you know about music, that is a great way of taking on board and consuming information. And in fact, maybe we could create a little jingle about the slave trade that would allow people to sort of take it on board in a way which is not going to be so offensive, because those things work, and there's a reason why they're doing that. They've got this candidate. They don't tell people that. Go on, sorry.
No, you just brought me with when you they use songs to obviously resonate with certain things. Like, for example, Bar Black Sheep. That's one of them as well.
And there's a brown girl in the ring. La, la, la. There's loads of things they do. It's all by
and even like
method, right? It's all ultimately they are in control of curriculum. Ultimately, these are the people that are writing syllabus. These are the people that are writing the courses. So they have the power to have that content control, right? So that's where the change needs to happen. I feel like we need to take more control of what is written in curriculum, what is delivered in the classrooms, and that can be done by becoming part of the governing board of schools, or opening up our own schools, or offering what we're doing right now, which is online platforms where people can chime in and have this type of education. Education doesn't have to be sitting in front of a desk with a pen and paper and a person standing at the front and you listening and just absorbing whatever this person's saying. We're now in this new age where we can take control back and use all these tools such as social media, YouTube, and offer different forms of education. Then it's up to the individual then to chime in to what resonates with them, instead of being dictated to and being told about themselves. You now have the freedom to search yourself, and that's where the change needs to happen. People need to realize that you take control, you have the freedom, and if you want it, you go get it. If you're going to sit there and wait for the government to offer you what it is you need, you're going to be waiting for a very long time, because it's against their agenda. If it doesn't capitalize, they're not interested. And right now we feed into that capitalistic system, capitalism system. By our minds and our bodies being in this state, we generate a lot of money for the elites. The minute we all begin to wake up, the minute we all begin to find out who we are, the minute that decentralizes, and they don't want that to happen. ultimately, right?
Exactly.
So this is why all these things are in place. This is why these things happen.
I've got a really good point.
Yeah, go on. No, you go.
Back to what you said about making change and engagement. You know, it's a sad thing, but it's the truth. Parents of color, although they tend to have a lot of emphasis on grades and accomplishment with their children, if recorded, they tend to push their children a lot harder than so-called white children do. And I think that could be as an attempt to try and overcompensate for some of the barriers. What doesn't happen as much though is engagement. And the school boards and the school councils, there are not enough people of color in those school boards. There really isn't. And I think that in itself could be one of the first things that as a community we looked at doing, having a network, and that network would have if we created a network of parents and then helped them, supported them, maybe trained them in some areas to take part effectively in school board meetings and governing meetings and push for that. That is, I think, would be a really powerful thing. And then, of course, that could probably come on board with, okay, the first step may be we need to do some research, or unless we already do that for them and present it. And okay, how exactly are we going to teach history holistically or elements of slavery holistically in a way which is not going to cause offense? Because when we do those things to those children in school, the truth is that they are traumatized and they are carrying that, and it affects their self-esteem, self-worth, and sense of identity. And no other group of people are having to go through that. And so afterwards, if you put somebody down, demoralize, devalue, and demote their heritage, and then afterwards say, okay, now go ahead and accomplish and achieve. No other group would allow that to happen to their children. Be like, oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay for you to put my child down. If there's like a little, for example, no, don't, you can't put. In fact, the BBC released a video about ancient Britain in Rome and the uproar of that video because they showed some ancient slaves on there, and the slaves had yellow hair. Had yellow hair. The uproar from the parenting community, you could say, and adults community was high. It was like, whoa. We're not okay. And that's how that's making me feel watching that. I don't want that for my child. Never mind the idea, and this was not being pushed out in curriculum, by the way. It was not. It was just present and was released up in the BBC. If it was a case of, okay, all your children are going to have to witness this BBC Ancient Britain show to show you what it was like in ancient Britain, and that actually white slaves existed, and this is some of the role that white slaves did, so to speak, you can guarantee there would be protest. And that's one thing that community haven't really got down very well, I don't think. I think since the civil rights movement, there's been a lot of dismantling to that. So it's not about us just shouting and causing a fuss. It's about, okay, us organising and arranging and knowing where to take actions like being part of the governing boards and having a group, first of all, and having people that are part of governing boards all over the country. And then using that same group to contact the curriculum board also, and then present to them the situation that's occurring and hold them accountable, first of all, because the truth of the matter is that what they're doing, in other aspects, technically is a crime. It's a crime to I mean, you can't be in a relationship with somebody and then put them down, and insult them or cause offense to them or demoralize them or devalue them in a relationship. That's abuse. And yet we're allowing our children to be in a classroom, essentially to undergo abuse. What's been told to them has been done in such an offensive way and not holistically. It's abusive. In the same way that
it's that power in numbers thing, isn't it? So if you look at the LGBT community, right, when they wanted to start putting content in books, right, the Islamic community was not having it. They were protesting outside their schools, saying, no, we're not sending our kids to school if you're going to read about the LGBT community, right? So it's that kind of thing that you're talking about. The same, which is say sex education, that's being protested, and and you know, the governing boards and the curriculum managers do listen. They do acknowledge the protest. They do then work and compromise with the parents, because ultimately the curriculum's for their children, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. We do just shut up and put up a lot of the time. We know it's happening, but then we don't actually take the next step, which is action. Say something, come together. Let's you know, target the heads, target management. And I think that has a lot to do with critical confidence. I don't think Black people know that they have the power to do these things,
Or the
right?
right, even. I think,
or the right to.
yeah.
They actually think the teacher's right. You know, if you think about, I'll give you a scenario, and it's just a made up scenario. So if a child's misbehaved at school, right, and the headmaster phones home, and or you know, head of department or whoever phones home, right, and says, Mr. Smith, or it would be Mr. Campbell. Yeah, let's make up a common Black name, right? Your child's misbehaved in school, and blah blah blah. Right, Mr. Campbell is going to take that teacher's word as gospel. He isn't even going to challenge the child and say, "What's your side of the story?" The teacher's right. Yeah, the teacher's always right. Now, in my experience, these people are human beings, right? They will exaggerate on the phone. Trust me, I'm a teacher of 20 years. These teachers have their favorites. These teachers want to get some of these children in trouble on purpose with their parents, right? I know it sounds crazy, but this is what's really going on behind the scenes. So it's important, right, that you listen to your child. You know your child, you get to know your child, you listen to your child's version of events first, right? And then understand what's being said, and kind of work out what's really happened. But don't be taking the teacher's word as absolute gospel. Understand that there's lots going on at school, because as I say, these people are human beings, and these people have got subconscious bias. These people don't really understand Black people, really. They've not grown up with the Black community. They don't really understand our culture. So what may be considered, oh, your child was loud in class and rude, might just be excitement. Might just be excitement. You get me? So this is what I'm saying about knowing your rights, knowing your power, understanding what goes on behind the scenes at school, and do not give these people all the power with regards to disciplining your children, and also the content that they're delivering in the classroom. You know, read the children's work. Like, ask your children, man, what did you learn today? Let me see your book. Let me see your teacher's feedback. Understand what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Go on then.
I just want to bounce off that what you said, because when I was doing biology in school, now as you said, like the teacher's always writing it. Now I remember doing one of my biology exams. I think it was my SATs, and it was the definition of DNA. Now I was reading from 2 books to pass my SATs in that year, and I wrote deoxyribose nucleic acid, which is DNA. I got marked down because I spelt it wrong. Apparently, said no, it's deoxyribonucleic acid. So when she pulled me up on that, she said, yeah, you spelt it wrong. And I pulled out 2 books. One book said deoxyribose nucleic acid. The other one said deoxyribonucleic acid. So which one's right? Do you know what I'm saying? So even with that, we have to question the information that's given to us. And this is the part about raising critical confidence, because in school, we were taught this is their way. They're right, and as you said, the gospel's always true what they say. And the reason why the parents are subdued in that realm is because they've already subject to the fact that if your children don't go to school, you get fined, this and that. And the third, you want your children to pass, so the teacher has to always be right, because what the teachers do on their end, they need to have a high pass rate for the whole school. So they're trying to do whatever they can to make sure that children's doing right by the curriculum. And if you look up the etymology of the word curriculum, it's like a race course. It's like running a race. Why? Because they obviously want to succeed according to their narrative. So imagine when you're looking at history, we can look at certain empires that happened, and even post the Renaissance period, a lot of things were whitewashed, and it was always correct. So what we were not taught,
Go
Yeah.
on.
So what happened? And when I'm looking at the history of our monarchy, especially over in the UK, British monarchy, and then when one of my friends, Malachi, I've spoken to you about him. He had this book, The Secret Memoirs of John Mackey. So when we was looking at Charles I and Charles II, when you Google them, these are European-looking people. But when this one guy that wrote the diary and actually described what they look like, black, swarthy people. So all of that's therefore we've been miseducated, because what I've learned when I was doing history, I'm learning about other cultures' history, Chinese New Year in February, Diwali, and all that. And then they gave us a Black History Month. But then when Black History Month, with that small segment, it wasn't even introduced into the curriculum of history. We was talking about other ancient Egypt and this and that, and that was whitewashed Egyptian history as well. All of that. So when obviously fast forward now to this day, when you learn, I'm like, hang on, this is where even my cousin, she took the children out of school because she knew the history was it's fake. I'll just say it as simple as that, because they've only give it to their narrative for their supremacy, and that's what it is. Because if you was one thing that you said as well, Corey, about in schools, you got Islamic schools, they solely talk about their culture and educate them on their culture. The westernized world talk about the westernized culture and their successes. They would talk about colonialism being a success rather than genocide and barbaric maneuvers that they did. When they talk about us, infuriated people, less than a human being, and even when they abolished slavery after the civil rights movement and all that, what did they do? They brought around the 13th Amendment. That's when they started to put people in certain areas. So we still was lacking our education. How can it's like me trying to educate a Chinese person how to be Chinese, but I'm not. How can an oppressor teach us how to be us when we one good example that we had was biology. Go back to biology. Which part did they teach us about melanin? They didn't. Why did they miss that area out? Why for that people? Like they could teach you everything else, how to have a good diet and Atkins diet and this and that and the third. But they don't tell us about how we need more alkaline than the rest. We can have a bit more carbs than the others. Our bodies are built different. Why they're not teaching us that? We need our own to teach us about ourselves. And that's why we need to revamp that whole part of the educational system. And the whole slavery mindset is where we're over here. Go on, Corey.
And before Corey goes in, I just want to acknowledge some of these comments because we've got a nice active chat facility this evening. First of all, I've got a name here I've never seen before. Yeah, so we've got. I'm wondering whether
his name's Kazak.
Right. So welcome, and he or she. I'm assuming it's a he. Yeah, says he agrees. But also disagrees with world education. So I'm interested in getting a response to that.
Yeah, put some up.
Like,
yeah,
what do you mean by you disagree? So if you can, post back in or join us in the discussion. I'd like to hear what you mean by that. He did say education is biased, of course, by design, right? Oh, no, that's you, Nathan. You said education is biased, and he's put 100. Yeah. Of course it is. By design, because it's capitalism, right? It's so everybody.
You said that when based on what Corey was saying.
Yeah. Then we've got Darwinian theory.
Corey, do you know about the Darwinian theory?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Charles Darwin.
Yeah. So you want to?
Did you know that Charles Darwin was a racist?
Yeah. Cool. Nice.
Was he racist? That don't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like Lincoln as well. Yes.
And you know the argument would be is that he's a man of his time. And my argument to that, my that would be, I don't really care what time it was. What I care about is the impact it's having right now. And if we know that, and you already knew that, why are we not reforming it?
Right.
That's because obviously that should be the primary thing. Okay, so if you know that, and we know it's been happening, why is that the foundation for what we're teaching right now without reform? Surely we're aware that it would cause trauma and offence. Alert and distress, it would be called, that's a legal term, alert and distress. That's the one in terms for like precursor to assault. And so if we're in a situation where somebody's causing you alert and distress,
Alarm.
yeah, that's a form of assault.
Alarm and distress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if when they're in them classes and they've been told these things, damn right they're distressed. And you damn right they're alarming too. Some of the ways we've been taught about like these things. We spoke the other day about how, well, I got an example. So melanin and teaching about the good parts. You mentioned before, Ms. Roots, about your experience when a teacher told you, and if I was to extract all that melanin, which is shocking in itself, that's like a it's like a troll get out. They claim Tyrone quote right there. If I was to extract that melanin from you, it would be equal to a 2 pence piece. He didn't, and how wrong was he? And obviously, that kind of response in itself again was devaluing. And considering the curriculum, you could have let that nugget. You could have been like, "That's true. You do have melanin.
Right.
I have melanin too. Maybe not in these areas as much as you in those areas, but yeah, melanin is important." Instead, it was offensive to him almost. And then I think so that kind of needs to be kind of like noted that this is happening in education. You mentioned Nathan about the whitewashing or the adjustment of history. My question to you was going to be is why do you think they're doing that, and what is the impact of that? And I'm going to prime you with representation. Pardon me, sorry. So we're aware of how important representation is. So when they first showed the that is it Halle or Bailey? Halle or Chloe? It was Halle as a mermaid for The Little Mermaid. She had like
yes, go on.
When they first showed that, there was a whole uproar, a whole holy uproar. As if you can't have a black mermaid. Some people were loving it. Like, oh, yeah, great inclusion. Some people were like, can't have a black mermaid. It's around people of color on islands. What are we talking about? Around water? Are we talking about? And the reason why that was important because representation is important. You know, with the movie Hunger Games, when they casted Rue as a little black girl, again, do you know there's a lot of uproar about that too in Hunger Games?
Yeah.
So do you know Rue from Hunger Games?
Yeah, I know the young one.
The little girl, yeah. So when they casted her again, there's like, wait a minute, he doesn't mention that in the book. He doesn't say she was white either though in the book. But most people who read it were pale skinned white people. So they envisioned her being white. And when they cast a black girl, again there was uproar. And so what I'm promising you is representation is really important. Representation that shows
and the one key thing here, which has been a heavily spiritual colonization to our people, is the color of Christ. That's the heaviest one. Yeah, that's the heaviest one. That supersedes all because we know written. It says in the scripture, if you believe, Christ said, if you believe on me, as the scripture has said, out of your belly flow rivers of living water, right? So that means, like, you having the knowledge of the appearance, right, matters. But then when you speak to certain Christian churches, say, oh, his color doesn't matter. But then why was John on the island of Patmos in the book of Revelation was told, you need to document what you see. What thou seest, write it in a book and send it to the 7 churches. Now, if any of us now know the truth, and we thought, all right, this person, during the Renaissance period, painted this white image of the Messiah, right? Now everyone, like your grandma's probably got in their house and this and that and the third, and they perceive him as God and this and that and the third. What if everyone now made a new depiction according to the scriptures? They find it offensive that the Messiah is black, because anytime you say it to someone, try this is a test to everybody. Pull out the scripture in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 14 and 15 and listen to what they say, especially devout Christians. Guaranteed, with the diagnostics of the situation, they will say it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Yeah, like I think, and that's
you should share that. Find that script. Let's put that up on the screen. Find that. Bang that up on the screen so it's there.
That's a defense for lack of representation. When it's presented, when an accurate account is presented, which doesn't fit the existing model, all of a sudden it doesn't really matter anyway, does it? And the truth of the matter is that if it doesn't matter, then let's change it. But if you notice, it's not been updated.
Exactly.
So the question was to you is that why do you think
people that believe
of go on. What do you think? Why do you think it is?
Sorry, go carry on, my bad.
We're just in history and adjusting the association with phenotype. You must, Nathan. Well, why are you getting it up?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay,
again, while you're doing that, let me just acknowledge some more of these as well. So the next comment was when we were talking about songs, and a lot of these songs came after slavery, right? So during the abolishment, when we were being reintegrated, and especially as well when we were brought from the Caribbean over to places like Britain and North America. We got songs like this one, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Moe, by the toe, right? So let's get it right. Yeah.
I just want to see it now, innit? Yeah. Oh gosh.
Definitely begins with
but no,
identity.
Funny about Trudeau, I remember that. We used to sing that like religiously, you know, without knowing, like with ignorance in it.
That's what I'm saying. And that's what we're tackling today, the identity. This is why this conversation's happening. So people can think about who they are, why they are, you know, what's caused us to challenge or not be proud of who we are. So this is exactly why we're even here this evening, to be fair. And then Brother Ashar is here. Peace, bro. Good to see you. Hopefully you'll chime in later. So Nathan has found the verse. I'm just going to take this off and remind you that we're having a critical look at slavery this evening.
Yeah, so the one that's highlighted in red.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the part that Corey was saying about representation in it. So there's a scripture in Hosea which talks about our people will dwell without a prince, a king, or an image. So our image started to get destroyed afterwards. So when our leader obviously looks like us, when you look, we're being God's children, we're melanated people, the children of the sun. That's all I'm saying. So when that got diminished during the rise of the Greco-Roman Empire, even when we had to call ourselves Gentiles and not by our bloodline, which were the Jews and all that stuff. So all that was diminished even prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And what you said, Miss Roots, was, you know, we only know that 400, 500 years. But what happened prior to that? How did we lead to that part as well? Even prior to the sub-Saharan, we got the Tang dynasty that was talking about. So here, anyway, going back to representation, when you read verse 14, which is highlighted in red, read that and 15. That is the description. If his color did not matter, then it wouldn't be written, just like as you mentioned in the book. If it didn't matter, then it wouldn't be written what he looked like. So now it's there. It was written for a reason. So we know who to look for or what to look at. Do you know what I'm saying? Or see the representation of one of the greatest people on the face of this earth. Even when you read Songs of Solomon, chapter 1 and verse 5, it says in his own words, I am black, but comely. The word comely means beautiful. So we get the phrase black and beautiful. But we forget these scriptures. We forget that because now with representation, what happened afterwards, when you look at, if you used to Google Adam and Eve, you don't see black people. So yeah, that's it for anyway. We can leave that for a second. You can take it down when you're ready.
I think again, identity is a big thing. And I'm like through the conversation, one of the things that I think the way slavery is taught is that it becomes the most prominent part of how black young people identify. And the fact that you mentioned earlier when you said to people, oh, what were people of color doing before slavery? And most didn't know. That's a problem. And I think that's the problem today. I think there are a couple of things that really are a problem. I think we need to address where a lot of these narratives came from. Where narratives came from and the impact of it, and be able to critically look at it and say, well, if those people were trying to keep certain people down, they told somebody something which puts them down. Was there any intent as part of that? So when we look at the situation regarding Darwin and evolution and Renaissance and racializing Jesus in that way, sometimes I feel like we're not even allowing ourselves to quickly think, was that intentional? And if it was intentional, what was the intent? And who benefits from it? And these are very logical, rational questions to be asking ourselves, well, who's benefiting from this? So regarding our children being offended, potentially like emotionally, psychologically assaulted in schools, who benefits from that? Because surely we would have thought that the impact of this is detrimental to development. It's detrimental to them succeeding, and the school wants grades, surely. So why is it that this is being perpetuated, or has been, even by the school itself? Now, granted, the schools take their curriculum from a higher authority and so on, but it was initialized from early on in that very manner. And for me, the biggest problem is one, there are so many misconceptions about slavery that we look at the context of it and start looking at the intent. So if a group of people wanted to put some people down, or wanted to slightly hold them back psychologically, this could have been a good way to do that. Traumatizing them at that critical stage prior to doing exams would have been a great way of ensuring certain people had other things to think about other than academic studies, and had different feelings that would conflict with learning efficiently, i.e., whether that be guilt, shame, this is individually for themselves, or low self-esteem, for example. So when you talk about the whole history thing, often Black history, they talk about the losses. They really, really talk about the wins. Rarely. And even when there are wins, there's often losses equal to that. And in order for someone to have a strong form of identity, they kind of need to know themselves holistically, because the elements of slavery or slave trade has been exaggerated and emphasized specifically on a specific group. I'd like to chime in here in a bit of a fact-based situation, because you mentioned, the ships that they talk about. Okay. So should I get a picture up or not? Is that too much? Should I get a picture up of the ship?
Go for it, bro.
Okay, so we're gonna get the ship up because I think that at this stage it could be quite useful. Because, and then we'll go through and discuss it. There are two things I want to talk about. Slave ship diagram. Okay. Smithsonian. There's one in the Encyclopedia of Virginia and one in Smithsonian. I'm going to go to image search now. 1 second, and pull one up. Okay, that one there from Science for Smithsonian. I'm going to go with the there's one actually which is actually the diagram. Let's have a look. Okay, there's one here which is a diagram. So I'm going to pull this one up. I'm going to share this because we need to really, we truly need to be able to
Oh yeah, and also once you finish this part, I want to touch back on a few things that you said as well, because I want to go back into PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome, how it reflects to how we're behaving today as well. Because you brought something up, and there's actually a term that I've got. I did it on my presentation with Miss Roots at the university, and there's one key thing which will really back up what you were saying earlier. Dr. Joy DeGroy did it actually. I've got it here, but I'll just read it out to be honest, if anything. If I can find the presentation of just that one slide.
Okay, so
you carry on anyway.
So I'm bringing the ship up. Here it is.
You might be able to.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So we've been given this image many times, and this is actually one of the lesser traumatic images. But there are a few things you could take away from this probably straight away. these are individuals which aren't seemingly being treated as human. That's probably the first thing. For every reason, they're not being treated as human. You can see that that's not a very plain way to be contained. Even if you're in prison, you get more space than that. And you could have committed murder or paedophilia, for example, and so on. And they're getting more space than that in this day and age. They're still getting computer, Xbox, and internet. I'm joking, but not. But yeah, these people here who are innocents are being shown to be
not joking at all, bro.
Now, I want to go back. I want to just touch base quickly on the sort of adjustments in history, the washing of history, and the question of, well, who would benefit from that? What could have been their intent, and what is the outcome? And so we know the outcome of this. Ooh, can we get? Is that me that made it go away, or? Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Let me get back up. So we know that the outcome is trauma. Okay, is it back up? We know the outcome of it is trauma. And we know that trauma has a detrimental effect on the person's ability to continue studying, etc., as it would with anybody. Now, the intent, we can leave that for a second. This ship here, this diagram of ship here, isn't authentic. This depiction was done way after the fact. Now, ships were used to carry people. There were often cargo ships. Many of them weren't purpose-built ships. There were cargo ships, and they kind of just put people in there. There are a few key factors to note on this situation here. Now, I'm just going to get up. Does anybody know off the top of their head how many people were on these slave ships, I reckon? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, how many people were carried? 700, I reckon. So they reckon as much as 700 people. Okay. Yeah. So as much as 700 people were carried in an era when these boats were very basic. The boats. Is that me? Is it going off again? Is that my fault? Is it?
No, it's still on. It's still on. We can still see the picture. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So okay. So the boat. Okay, the boat itself. Okay, so let's get into this. 700 people, and they're traveling for 4 to 6 months direct from Atlantic travel via the ocean without a motor, without oil, and so on. 4 to 6, reckon 3 to 6 months, 4 to 6 months realistically. Yeah, and a good voyage. For these people, 700 people. First of all, we have to acknowledge the sheer science of this. Look at this critically. Give me a second. Facilities for urination and defecation. And what's the impact of that regarding disease and the for fatality on a ship like this? Where is the water? Where are they carrying the water for these people to survive for 3 to 6 months over the ocean? And that's not including food.
Exactly.
And so
this is why a lot of them try to jump off.
Well, again, these are narratives that have been presented to us. I'm not saying they are or not. People did that. I'm sure people probably did that. But first and foremost, you have to realize actually this is disingenuine. This is a disingenuine depiction of a ship that would have carried human cargo. And I would suggest that it may have been done in a way of degrading, demoting, and demeaning individuals. It is not feasible for 700 people to be carried on a ship like this without water for those 700 people, without facilities for defecation or urination. And even if they were catching fish on occasion, for example, it still wouldn't compensate for the lack of bathing, that's a bathing, urination, defecation facilities, which would cause death. That would cause death within weeks. Just clarifying, you've got 700 people on a boat, and they reckon they were wheeling and pooping on each other. They weren't in a coma. Yeah, I mean, we know what it's like in sort of the what called the plague times, for example. People dashing things out the window. So we have to look at this critically and be like, well, how did they maintain hygiene on a ship like this? I don't believe they could. There's no evidence to show that they could. There's no technology being depicted that would have enabled them to do that. How would they have carried water, even if they were going to starve them for 4 to 6 months? And we actually believe that crossing the ocean like that in a seawater, it's going to be feasible to go without water for more than 2 months and survive. Wow. 3 months, come on. 3 months without water.
Now imagine like even that on top of that, yeah. Imagine like as he's talking about like things like the unhygienic part, like obviously with bacteria how it multiplies over time. So imagine in 3 months here how much bacteria is under those on those decks. That's gonna be ridiculous. Exactly. Not all of them made it.
Well, some people I don't believe. My argument is that this ship was not. This is a false depiction of essentially psychological abuse.
Well, that's exactly what happened, though, isn't it? The whole thing with the Stockholm and all that, it got to that point.
Well, so you say that's exactly how it happened. We're taking that narrative from the same people that didn't want to show us an accurate depiction of Jesus, and then we're going to assume that they're giving us this for our own good. We have to look at this in a.
It wasn't even for the own good. Remember how you got to remember how they used the scriptures as well. Like when you said in the last podcast about slaves obey your earthly masters. So they was using that for our own good. When you actually look at the word properly, the word slave comes word Slavic and all that, but it's more.
Go on.
Go on. But yeah, it's just so basically
about the crew breakdowns and the whole the use of the term and the age of the term and what it refers to. So we'll come on to that in a second.
So just to clarify then, Corey, you're saying that this picture that you have up on the screen, this is the picture that is used in the classroom, in curriculum. Yeah. These pictures are used in most textbooks when history teachers are teaching young people about the transatlantic slave trade, right? Yeah. What I find interesting is you've critically analysed this and you're saying this cannot be realistic. Like we said earlier, representation is everything, right? So it's almost like this image has been used to continue to enforce this narrative of power. This is what we were able to do. We were able to pack 700 Africans upon a ship like this. Yes, they brought Africans on ships, but not 700 on top of each other like that, right? Is this what you're saying?
Yeah. Right. I'm saying exactly that. They use basically exactly that. This is a feat, and I'm glad you mentioned the power thing because that's exactly what it is. When they talk about the situation with us and they're like, oh yeah, they basically make it out like a couple of white guys just rocked up onto the coast of Africa and was snatching up black people like they were berries on a tree. And nobody in any of the civilizations or any of those communities that had been building and writing and doing maths and science all those years, making ships of their own, could stop them. Because these were people like gods, you could say. When we think about it, that's what's kind of being presented. Like gods or aliens. They came up and snatched up a dagger. No one could stop them. And put 700 of them into like a sardine can boat, and did one magic spell, and they could live without water. And just clarify, not for 3 days, because on average, you reckon 3 days is our length of white water. By the way, 3 days.
Well, 4 days max. 4 days max before you can parchment dead. Yeah.
Well, so it's like slavery is not just a physical. It's not just a physical thing, it's a mental thing, it's a spiritual thing. And they know that. If you're going to enslave someone, you can't just enslave their bodies. You better capture their minds, you better capture their souls, you better capture everything for us to have ultimate control.
There's an actual scripture that talks about that. Your head, your mind, is the thing that functions your whole body. Basically, when you destroy the neck, I think it's in the book of Nahum or something, about they found a way to be able to destroy the head by cutting off the neck, basically cut off your mindset, mental slavery. So they had to do it. It's like abuse in relationships. There's certain times, this is where the Stockholm kicks in, where you start to have compassion for your captor to put you in a position where they'll break you so far in, but they won't kill you. And then when they say, all right, cool, I'm going to let you live, you have compassion. So you're now at a degree, you're at that borderline where you think, you know what, I need to stay here so I don't get killed. So you start to say, like, you know, like you're about to die, but you're like, thank you. And it's that, and that's the whole Stockholm part. And this is where they start to mess up here.
I think once you've got someone's mind, you've got everything, right?
There you go.
Once you've got someone's mind, you've got their body. You can get you can't get their soul, but you can affect their spirit, right?
Exactly. You can taint it. It's called the tainted man. There's a thing that I did before about the tainted man and the tainted woman, the tainted black man and woman, how they've been spiritually disorientated. And this is our job is to try and fix this now, you know. And that's what's happening. I'm glad that we're in this part of slavery now, what we're talking about, because we need to say, like, yes, it wasn't like an easy physical thing. There's a whole spiritual stuff that happened. We actually disengaged ourselves, even with our own discrepancies, as beings, right, from our creator, from knowing nature, and to actually be intertwined with how the type of people that we are. Once we divided ourselves at one point, it allowed us, when we stop keeping the actual laws of life, basically, when we stopped doing that, we were given over, we were actually vulnerable, because one of the things that we were doing, we were given a lot of information, you know, like, for example, learning astrology, dietary laws and this and that, how to be clean. We were feeding a lot of information. And do you remember it says what the scripture said, don't cast your pearls to swine, meaning don't give everyone your secrets, because the secrets don't belong to them, it belongs to us. You know what I'm saying? But we was giving it out because we are naturally, for example, we're inviting people, friendly people. That's why we don't conform to their ways. And that's the thing. That's our mistake. Our sovereignty has been lost throughout that over a heavy period of time, over a couple of millennia now. So yeah, there's been a lot that's happened.
It's interesting. I think what Corey's put up on the screen is one of the secrets, right? That use it. This is like propaganda. This is like how you get into people's minds with images, like telling this kind of rhetoric.
Propaganda,
image retains a lot of power. I have to say, it does retain power.
It's like 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And so that simple image there. Just looking at that image, straight away conveys my ancestors were treated inhumanely or wasn't perceived to be human. And if someone showed my ancestors doing something embarrassing, you'd be embarrassed, wouldn't you? And they're showing our teenage children this kind of thing and saying, this was your ancestors. This is where you came from. And I think
that's all the
and the sheer, like, do you know that embarrassment can be used as a form of abuse?
Yes. We do it all the time, don't we? When you embarrass somebody in public, it is a form of abuse. Yeah. And so
they're exposing children. This is a generational part. Yeah, it is. I can agree with that. This is abuse in one sense.
So they're showing our children this, and then because it's so traumatic and abusive, and if they try and say, "Well, there a minute, miss or sir," what were they drinking for 6 months? Because 6 months. What were they eating for 6 months? They'd get shut down. But the fact is that, let's say, for example, you can last, 30 days without water. You can't. Or 30 days. These people are on this ship for 6 months, 4 months at least. That's not like, half of them made it. That's all of them die. And so the question really should be, and when we look at the whole Plymouth Rock, the whole Plymouth Rock and Jamestown in the US.
No.
You don't? Okay, Plymouth Rock and Jamestown in the US. Okay.
Jamestown. So I'm watching a video about that the other day as well.
So this is a famous quote from Malcolm X that we didn't land in Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us.
Okay.
Do you know that quote?
Yep, that's why I'm laughing. Yeah, I remember that.
Okay.
We do have to accountability parts as well, but yeah, carry on anyway.
I'm quickly going to change my my screen sharing quickly so we can see that.
Yeah.
After you've done that, we're going to acknowledge some of these comments as well, because we've got some that we need to respond to.
That's good. That's good. So, where is that in the way? Okay.
Actually, looking at the comments, I think you might have to carry on, Corey, as well, because I know you want to touch down on one of these comments. I'm looking at it right now by Asher. But carry on anyway.
Oh, okay. This one.
Yeah, you've already touched on it, but we'll elaborate.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you put that up on the screen a sec. So this here, this is like official documentation. It's from the Encyclopedia of Virginia. 20 Oneida Negroes. Okay, and these were like the first enslaved to arrive in the US. It said, but there's only 20 of them on the ship. On this one, for example. Yes. And then later on, it's explained that, no, but then it ramped up. Okay, maybe to 50, maybe to 100 or so. We tell me you put 700 people. I mean, how many people were on the Titanic? Can we just check that price out now?
You know what? Funny enough, Corey, you just click something. You know, like these big, like let's look at 2023 or the 2000s here. Look at these big ships here, the big cruisers. What's their maximum capacity?
Well, I know the Titanic held 22. It says 2,200 here, which is 2,400.
Yeah, but that's exactly
the average. The average ferry.
I'm just thinking about weight and buoyancy now. I'm getting into some physics on this one.
Yeah, but it's non-conducive, because if we understand that the transatlantic slave trade was a business, people had probably already paid for these slaves in like credit. Right,
yeah,
so you better get their goods back in one whole piece, because they've already, you know what I mean, sponsored a slave, or this is money, so they're not going to jeopardize any project.
That's what I feel. When I did my research on it, it was like a pre-ordered. It wasn't that they snatched people; they were sold by the Arabs and the East Africans, and that they were sold by them to the East to the Europeans. It wasn't that they came there and actually snatched. Right, they actually were sold to them, and that's why for example, you got the slave port. It's written as Ouida, Ouida, which is still there in Ghana, which is a Judah slave port. So obviously that's there and still sitting there and standing there to this day. So obviously that was a port where people had to pass through there before they got put onto the ships. Were docking, there's chattel in it. So that's there, and that's historical evidence to this day. So yes, they were sold. It wasn't that they got snatched. Judah slave port in Ghana is still there standing now. Where they actually,
Is this one with the door? Is it? Is this one with the door?
It's like it looks like a mad version of Marble. It's like a Marble Arch in London. It's like looking like that at the same time as a castle. Yeah, so it's like a big place. This if you go to Liverpool, I'm not sure if Kazak's still here, but we went to the Slave Museum in Liverpool, and there's one big place which looks similar to the Judah slave port. The same way it was built. It was like a big slave house, like a chattel house, and they was all in there, stored there until the boat came and they got shipped out. And we have to, guys, we have to go to that slave museum.
On that note, so we're going to go to the thingy. So one thing that I think I would love us to try and do is try and stay open-minded about other aspects of it too. And so if you've identified that at least at the moment, it's one element, i.e. the boats that are being depicted as being used are more propaganda than practical. And like you said, Ms. Roots, these are people, this is value. I'm not going to ship 700. I mean, even if they were only worth £1 each, that's £700 back in those days. And it was a lot more than that. A lot more than that.
Exactly. And in inflation from back then to now.
Exactly.
Talking like billion a body.
So, I mean, I'm not even sure what they reckon it was the average cost. 1 second.
It definitely would have been very strategic, because they would have been told
$25, it reckons.
So many. Yeah, they would have been told to bring back so many and of a certain kind, and for who it was, and bring back 5 for the Frenchman and 10 for the Englishman. And you're not just going to pack up a boat of 700 slaves, and then it just doesn't seem logical, right? So you say the value. Sorry.
Yeah, and even you saying that, Miss Roots, because there was still needed slaves back in the land of Africa as well. So the Arabs still needed them, like the thing that's still happening in Libya today. So they didn't. like they didn't get rid of everyone. They still needed their own to still build their lands. Because, for example, if you look in the Oxford Dictionary, or is it the Cambridge Dictionary, if you look up the word ghetto, so the shanty towns, the slums, just look up the word ghetto in the, I think it's the Oxford or the Cambridge Dictionary. It says where the Jews reside, the certain particular type of bloodline of people. Only slave, wherever you, like today, most of our people always been conditioned and put in low class areas, shanty towns, this and that and the third. Like, for example, Nigeria, Lagos, that place is booming. But the people that were subject to slavery, that had to adopt their different surnames, where are they living? Like desert looking places, which is the truth. Because my brother-in-law, where he's building a house right now over there, that place is like desert kind of. So they still reside in those places to this day. The same thing in Brazil, in Rio. I'm not sure if you watched the movie City of God or City of Men. Yeah. They had to start to build a whole environment there themselves, rather than the rest of Brazil looks banging. And the people that are running those places are the light skin looking Latinas.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so okay. I just want to touch base on, so it's 17,500 by the way. So if the boat was, and that's like in today's money, so I'm not sure what the inflation would be that from now.
You might be able to calculate the inflation, you know, from back then to now. Just get the date, and you should be able to do it, bro. That's gonna be some coins, you know. I don't need that. I've got the presentation on the screen. Sorry, I'm just talking to myself. So I still want to get that PTSS definition on that one slide when you're ready. But carry on with this, bro. You're doing well, man. I like this. So you got me taking notes.
Okay, so so yeah, so $1. This is the value of. Okay, I'm sorry. I usually find that. Okay. Well, they reckon that.
Do it to the year 19. How much was it in the late 1900s, like 1990 or something? Actually,
I've got a calculator here actually. So
yeah, do it to after the civil rights movement. Was that 1960? What?
1960. So we're saying.
So yeah, do to around about then. So how did the value
from 1600 to 1960?
Yeah. So yeah, do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're worth some coins, bro.
What's going on here? Okay, it's giving me like 20, 24. Let me see if it gives me that. It's not.
Even do that. Just say today.
Rational rate of the consumer. Well, it's well, basically, you're saying that, just for argument's sake, 1,600 from 1695 in today would be 144,000.
Have you got a screen of that? Have you got that on the screen?
144,000, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to find a better inflation calculator though, because this one's not. Well, it's doing it. Oh, okay, it's doing its thing, but it's not the best. Not what's going on with this. So
it wouldn't be.
Yeah, I can show that. I'll show it. I will show it.
That would, because even the household that they made, that would have 144, 144, 144. It still would end up in the millions, you know.
So that is why it would not be conducive to be piling up those ships with so much product. And then, as you say, it took 6 months to set sail and reach their destination. So all of this would have been taken into account, the time, resources such as water, food, and all the above, space, and they would have planned for any storms and things like that. So yeah, it makes sense that the absolute propaganda, you know, it wouldn't have made any sense at all.
I'm taking a picture of Ash's thing. I need to research on that.
Let me just get this up for you then. So I've got it, and it is gosh, my fingers come up with.
Just let you know, it's 8 o'clock now as well, just by the way.
Oh, is it? Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
I've got it here now. I've got it here. So here it is. It's So the average price for someone was $25. There was 700 people reckoned on the boat, which had been worth more than £60,000 today. No, £60,000 today. And so they'd have been losing £50,000 a time, at least. And that's if they could keep maybe what 50 or more people alive. I mean, remember, like I said, it was a business, and so unless it was an act of genocide in itself, throwing them on a ship just to dash them in the water, then it wouldn't have made no sense at all. Which, to be honest, it's not off the table. We could consider that too, because genocide was happening. And so a lot of the narrative that we've been given around the whole slave trade, we could do with assessing it for ourselves, because most of what we've been given has been given to us from the very people that were oppressing us previously. And then we built on top of that foundation in every sector of education, pretty much. And we've done the best we could with the information we had available at the time. I think now when we look at things, we can easily show that that ship couldn't have functioned. We can also show that the cost of £50,000 to lose that for a business consistently would be ridiculous. I'm not sure, let me see how many ships are estimated to have been. How many ship voyages?
Whilst doing that, yeah, I just want to add something. Whilst doing that, I want to add something, because you got to remember as well. It's not just these people, not immortals. Once they get on that plantation, what they were doing as well, and there was another trade that they were doing back then as well. They were breeding our people as well. So once over there, we're still multiplying over there. So they're still breeding us. So whatever that was considered lost down there, they'd still breed us up on the plantations anyway. I mean, so even with
I think that I think they're breeding us now, technically. I mean, if you look at the sponsorship now, I'd say for family planning and sponsorship, so that's they're breeding us right now.
Consideration, as I'm saying.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I do think it's cool, but I think sometimes the reason why I'm talking about it is because the way that we kind of talk about it sometimes is as if like we're chattel, kind of like to talk about like them breeding us is like it's very, for me, very demeaning idea that a group of people were breeding us like they breed dogs and horses. And don't get me wrong,
exactly what they were doing.
I'm not saying, well, we need to see the evidence for that at this point. So I'm not saying that there wasn't population and marriages happening, because there was, but we know there are also marriages happening during slavery, actual marriages that were willing marriages. Yes, there was rape happening too, but what I'm saying is that it's not conducive for us to just go with narratives that would be being presented any more than it is us being told about history. We know it's been washed, and now we can prove actually many of those monarchs and nobles were Swazi or black people. And so I think that it's like how propaganda was used for the ship. Oh yeah, we were so powerful. You weren't even human to us. We were so powerful. Same goes when we're being told that we're treated like dogs or horses. Again, we're being devalued, we're being demoralized. If you look at the actual evidence for it, they don't talk about us getting married separately. They don't. When they talk about that, oh yeah, guess what? You guys were still jumping the broom and getting married during slavery. They don't talk about that. But then we're talking about breeding farms. I'm thinking, And so again, it's not holistic, and there's a lot more to the narrative than is being presented. I'm about to show you now quickly on the screen.
Before you move on, Corey, we've got a couple of comments that slot in nicely with what you've just presented. So can we respond to them? So we got Ashar saying that here, but remember that inflation value, right? So in essence, they're losing.
I'll help on that as well.
Yeah. So they're things falling apart at an alarming rate in terms of the business, the capitalism. They're not making that much money anymore, right? So he's saying that this is good for our people if aware. And then we've got some figures here, look, right? So $1,700 from 1635, right? So that's like 63,000 in inflation value.
I mean, that means remember 50K, not including the ship. If the ship was damaged, like you said.
Now, even with that, now on top of that, so let's talk about the inflation part now. Basically, modern day now, like certain essences and things and value of an asset, it can increase and decrease. So we're looking at trading now, like stocks. So we were known as stock in it, chattel, right? So imagine a human being being like an NFT or a crypto. Now, even with that as a standard value that we got here, right? You got to think now, what farm were they working on? What plantation? What are their assets? And that's a standard rate without the work that they produced.
Oh yeah,
so
the forecast
external
cost, like all of earnings.
Thank you. Right. So that's them. That's just base value. That is. So imagine what they accumulated whilst then, even with their offspring as well that came about on the plantation, whether it was consensual marriage or forced, interbreeding, whichever way it is. Either way, what if I've owned one, so if I'm a slave owner now, and I've either allowed these couples that I own to get married or not, or if I force them, whatever comes out that is another increase. So this is based on one person, one individual unit. So look at all the things that accumulated from that alone. So that there is light work for them. That's like, all right, either way, if this person dies tomorrow, yeah, right, or whatever, right, I've now, in that time, with the legacy of my, that stock, right, is going to increase in value. The only thing that they did on the plantation, they tried to preserve them, but they knew they had a lot of, what's it called? Is it X something income, where you can throw it away, money that can just dash away, basically. That's what it was to them. Yeah, so that's why they could, like at certain times, they could afford to kill someone rather than like in this day and age, in this modern day world of employment, you get the sack. They could afford to actually, they didn't sack you because then you couldn't go, they didn't want them to go into another plantation unless you was exchanged for something. You was a valuable asset, and that's what it is. They'd only kill you because they didn't do what them. I can't remember which act that they put in. Even this is prior to the civil rights movement, where they gave them the opportunity to feel like they're actually working now. So this is when the introduction of the house slaves came into play, and that was I think Asher. No, I know you'd know this, bro. So in the 17 something, it happened where they didn't want to kill off their slaves anymore. Like all servants, and that they.
So
yeah, go on.
I think so. I'm not saying they didn't kill off slaves, but again, so I've just checked the value. So if you share my screen a sec, so we've got like a
yeah, go.
I think is it there still?
Yeah.
So okay, my screen's on. So we can see that. Is it saying how many voyages? Oh no, that's the wrong one. Okay, I'm on the wrong part. But we'll come back to that in a second. So there was 36,000 voyages, I reckon. So 36,000 voyages at a £50,000 loss a time. 36,000 voyages, I reckon. Yeah. So that is one heck of a lot of money.
Trips.
That would have been lost. Just a second. Times a second. So
that's crazy.
That's crazy. So that's like how many zeros is this? Let me just check how many zeros that is, because I need to check that. That's like 1,800 million.
Wow.
What was it? That's about. It could be 18 million. Because that's kind of just about it. So I'm going to say it's thingy. I'm going to do that question right now, fresh from the character while I'm here. So,
yeah.
Times 1 second. I mean, that's not all the money, because obviously it was 62 in total. Okay, 180 million. No, that's 100. Yeah, so yeah, so 1,800 million is coming up with still. So that's a lot. That is a lot. That's a lot of so that's a lot of money lost. A heck of a lot of money lost. And if we go to sort of the value here, so I've just typed in quickly just to get an estimated value, measuring the worth of a lifetime of a slave would be possibly talking about from $14,000 to $240,000 earned. So that's $250,000. So each slave, they reckon, could probably earn them $250,000. And so the initial cost that we've got at the moment, we're talking 1,800 million in initial loss cost, 36 voyages that are shipped. And there's going to be what, £50,000 loss in each voyage. We're talking a lot of money. That's genocide. That ain't business.
Mm.
And that's not including this here, $250,000 per person also. That would also be lost. That's not added on to that value. That was the value of a $25 per person, 700 people on a ship. This is saying the value of that individual person after the initial cost of purchase of $25 would have been $250,000. We're talking billions we're talking about billions, maybe trillions of dollars that would have been lost. That to me sounds more like genocide than business. That it truly does. And I think there's one more thing I want to show quickly, because before we get back on some of them comments, which are really great, from it's a really amazing source. And I think that, because what I think we need to do right now is, okay, well, we know that something's been propagandized. We know that. We can see that there's been nothing's going on. And we know the impact of that seems like it's perpetuating lower accomplishment than is required. And I think, and that's really the key part here. If we were to look at this critically, we say, well, wait a minute, there are certain groups that are underachieving in areas. And on top of that, they're suffering psychological and emotional abuse. But then, surely we should lessen the abuse to allow them to succeed better. On top of that, when they do qualify, they're being told, well, they're being discriminated because of the name they might have on their CV. They might be discriminated because of the culture when they go to the interview. Maybe discriminated because of their culture and gender, possibly, depending.
Yeah.
So there are all these things happening, and it's as if we're letting the world happen to us rather than participating so much in many areas. This next content I'm going to show in a sec now, again, it's about looking at it with critical eyes and asking, can we verify this? Can we look at this? Because the evidence is there, you see. And so we talk a lot about and this is obviously from Fair Use, Aboriginal Global Media. Talk a lot about making things correct and right, and then getting ourselves out of the situation. The problem we've got at the moment is that our identity has been stolen and warped, and we're still struggling to figure it all out. We're not saying that slavery didn't happen at all, but we are saying, and we're showing some evidence here to show that actually it definitely didn't happen the way they said it happened. It definitely never. And so I'm going to play this now. I'm going to have a look at what this evidence suggests.
Okay, bro. Yeah, go for it.
About the slave trade.
Quarter past as well.
And this book is.
Can you hear me okay? Was that you, Nathan?
That was me.
Okay.
This week, and it's a part of the documentary series, We Are Indigenous. When we go to the Slave Trade Voyages website, we can see an estimate of over 12 million slaves from Africa and an estimate in the inter-American slave trade of over 600,000. Yet they use the word imputed. And what does that mean? It means assigned to something by inference from the value of the products or processes to which it contributes. Estimated. So these are estimates and inferences. When we go to the actual voyages, we notice in the next to last column that some of the ships had, this is a close-up of it. So what was on the ships that traveled all the way across the Atlantic? We see the very same thing for the inter-American voyages. No captives on ships that were traveling. They were not carrying slaves, they were carrying commodities. When we get to the data variables, we see that embarkments were only over 8,000 for Africa. Disembarkments at 18,000. This is the inter-American real data variables, and we see 7,000 embarked and about 22,000 disembarked. So what are we witnessing here? What we have here is a time lapse of the ships. Over 20-some thousand ships in the inter-American, and there were over 36,000 from Africa. Yet, when we calculate the data from embarkments, the actual data, what we find out is that the numbers only reach about 16,000 actual data embarkments. And if we count the disembarkments, we get about 40,000 in the slave trade. All of the ships that are listed with no captives that travel across the waters What do you think they were carrying? Why would you travel from London to Africa, all the way across the Atlantic with no captives? This is their data. This is not me making this up. And so what we have here is a very deceptive inference, estimated, imputed system of trying to hide something. And what are they trying to hide? You're looking at it in the time lapse. Indigenous people were taken from South Carolina into Cuba, from the Carolinas and Virginia into Jamaica, from Jamaica back into the States, from Brazil into the North American continent, from the North American continent back into Mexico. In fact, the slave trade started with Americans being taken from America back to Europe and Africa. And so we wrote the book, They Lied About the Slave Trade, so that you could get this information and not have to go by estimates, inferences, or something being imputed to you. They listed the real data on the very same website that they lied on. And this is important because this shows if someone will go through this much effort to lie, to deceive, to veil, through very shrewd methods, what do they want to hide? They want to hide the fact that the population of Black Americans in the Americas was already here. The mound builders, the pyramid civilizations, the She. Not only do we have their commentary of proof when they first came here and who they saw, but we left it in stone. Where else can you go and see locks and dark skin in Bonaparte, in Chichen Itza? They lied about the transatlantic slave trade. They lied about a lot. But this impacts your identity. And so it was important for us to write this book. They lied about the slave trade. Inference.
Imputed. I'll leave it on that there. So I've left it on where it says imputed, because I think that's a really important aspect of that content. He noted that on the official documentation for slavevoyages.org, that many of the ships had no cargo listed and were empty ships, and many of the accounts were imputed. And we've already acknowledged that actually they've gone as far as to repaint old paintings. And it isn't the first time. People have been complaining about that from ancient Egypt and from back in the day. But there are many. How come? And they call it sort of restoration.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, guess what? We haven't got the correct shade of paint right now. So we're going to put this coat on here. But later on, maybe we'll come back and then, but it never gets updated. And so what I think it's important for us to do, as for me, and I think from my perspective, I'm aware that we're all indigenous peoples. And for me, that is such a powerful thing, because we are all over the world, which means that as soon as we can identify that, we can be trading all over the world.
Right.
With our parties and our family and our ancestors from all over the world, because all the resources grow all over the world.
Right.
To be bottlenecked
Right,
into one place in order to have identity. All right. So, and again, identity is a bit more complex than that and simple though. Go on, Nathan.
Yeah, what I'm saying, even with that, I can't refute the fact that we are indigenous all over, like even the Filipinos and all that stuff as well, like the Negritos, as it was known as that point, like we spread across. Now, with that, as you're saying, the idealism is amazing that we could trade in this and that. So again, we need to go to the source, back to the roots of where did it all go wrong and why is it still at this place? Why did we get ourselves in a position where we lost our identity? We lost our surnames and things like that. Even if we've got European surnames and all that stuff, how did we allow that to happen? It's not like did we put ourselves on the ships, or were we taken and this and that? Do you know what I'm saying? Even though we know that we. Can you put me back on the screen? Go on. And I still need to get that PTSS up, and we've only got 10 minutes.
Okay.
As well, bro.
Quick, give me one sec. Put me back on the screen if you can for a sec.
Yeah, go.
Because you mentioned Bonaparte, and this is Britannica. So I'm on Britannica right now. I'm on screen.
Yeah, oh, I've seen this before. You know that this image. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit, Corey. We can't hear you.
Yeah, you're kind of probably because your server in it. Get up and get what you need
Yeah,
first.
no,
and
it's
then-
because you're on mute, Corey. It's because you're on mute.
Oh, is it? Yeah, you're on mute. You know, unmute yourself when you can.
Okay.
That's better.
So
I can hear you now.
thank you. So at the moment, it's getting a bit messy. So these are the murals anyway from Bonaparte. Oh gosh, got the beach ball. It shuts down. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, but it might happen. Okay, so we're on Britannica. So I came to Britannica because I wanted to see, like, this is not me making anything up. This is not like Chief Shirley making anything up either. You mentioned Bonaparte, and these are the murals so this is how they depicted themselves. This is not like anybody projecting. This is how they depicted themselves. My diesel, I might have to shut down some stuff in a second. I might have to shut some stuff down.
Oh, some of these.
Computer overload.
Basically, yeah. My computer's struggling with one as well. It's struggling. But can you see the images that's on there?
Yes, we can. We can see them. The depictions of swarthy people in Mexico. In Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so
I'd love to go to Machu Picchu, you know.
What, sorry? Machu Picchu.
I'd love to go to Machu Picchu where they've got the pyramids over there as well. One of the biggest ones in Machu Picchu in Mexico, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do, and I think, but they've got these kind of murals all over the Americas, you see. And these were long before. Well, I mean, these were long before. God damn it! Long before the slave trade, and so one of the greatest things we told you before about identity and about what we fight for. Well, they've disinherited us in so many ways. We don't really even know where to start at the moment. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we've got. And so this is really about us acknowledging, actually, wait there a minute. I'm going to go to, if it lets me, my computer is bugging right now. It's bugging. So what I might do is that it's probably best if we drop the screen, because I'm about to go full ninja karate on this computer in a second.
You know, technology, maybe it's picking up on the algorithm, doesn't want you to share the information, Corey. Yeah.
Well,
Ofcom's, I think Ofcom's chimed in. Yeah, Ofcom's chimed in. They're like, oh gosh, what's going on here? What are these guys up to?
Corey's at it again, telling them about themselves, showing them themselves. Yeah. It's all good.
And just on top of that, whilst doing that, just for time's sake, it's 2024 now. Oh yeah, you can change the brightness of your screen as well. On the top of it, I'm not sure what keyboard you got, but on the top of it, you got like the two sun images. If you hit the smaller one, it might. Yeah, if you lower your screen,
I've got so many tabs running at the moment. At the moment, I've got like so many tabs running on multiple browsers, including this stream, that it's my computer's like crying at me at the moment. So obviously, I had a lot of content up and I had some slides and stuff ready, but we could do like
I was about to say that we definitely need to do part 2 on this, because we haven't touched on the current climate in slavery as well. But we're gonna have to chop it in a minute.
Yeah, but I do want us to go back to this quickly.
Okay, sure.
Before we wrap up, I'm just gonna scroll up because a comment will trigger the conversation. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. So here, We touched on it earlier. Yeah. So BBC posted on their site that slavery started with the Slavs.
Yeah, and this is where you was going to touch on earlier as well, because I mentioned it earlier, and then you said you want to touch on, and now Ashley's obviously reincarnated that situation. So big up to you, Ashley, for that as well.
Well, do you know? Remember, I mentioned to you the Mann Act, which is the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
We can, but you have frozen.
Yes. So basically. All right. Well, I'm going to be when my computer allows me, I'm going to be shutting this down. Not you guys. I feel I should be okay. But at the moment, it is like but basically, what I'm talking about here is there was a law act, more than one primary act from 1910, which is it was called the Mann Act, MANN, and it was basically the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910. It was later renamed to the Mann Act, again, to cover up the whole narrative. Can you hear me okay with that?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
And here you can see you. Yeah, Mann Act 1910.
Okay. Yep.
The Mann Act, yeah, the Mann Act. And so if you look at how history is being taught, we've been taught that, we're the only ones that have been enslaved, really. When they talk about these things in class, they're not assaulting or getting all emotionally traumatic. When if you was to say to them and show them, anybody else, any other group, the same things that we're being shown, our teenagers, there would be an uproar. Can you imagine if in school there was a slavery lesson, and in that slavery lesson they taught about the US Army had to go in. Basically, the comments, the US Navy was created to free white slaves. I'll say that again. The US Navy was founded initially to free white slaves.
Wow.
Did you get that?
Got it.
Miss Roots, I beg you put the last comment that Ashley said. Last one.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice research.
Okay. What we're going to have to do.
We definitely need to do part 2, bro. On this.
Cool. Well, time to look. Oh yeah, definitely. Moment. I'll be back in I'll be back in 1 minute. Okay.
All right. Cool. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to support you on that. I'm going to go backtrack. Yeah. I'm gonna just put that slide up real quick because time's sake here. So you guys just this is one of the slides that I did with the whole presentation myself and Miss Roots did at the University of Wolverhampton. And there's one thing we was talking about. Obviously, this is PTSS, which is post-traumatic slave syndrome. So this is the effects of today. And there's a psychologist, black psychologist, Dr. Joy DeGroy, who Miss Roots actually introduced me to, and been heavily studying on what she's doing about PTSS. And she actually coined the name so we can articulate our situation. So I'm just going to put this up real quick so you can have a read. Let me go to share screen and let's go here. Share that. It's just this part here.
It's loading.
Let me go back onto our screen now. So I think so. It's coming. It's just taking time on my end. I don't know why.
It's buffering. Yeah. Here we go.
All right, guys. Well, what I'll do, I'll read it out anyway. So this is the definition of PTSS, and there's something that Corey brought up here, but he didn't have the term for it, which is the very bottom in bold. I'm going to read it from the top whilst he's getting himself sorted. It says, so post-traumatic slave syndrome. It says, this is a diagnostic term which has been coined through theory development via researcher Dr. Joy DeGroy. So she's a doctor with a PhD, and Miss Roots will be there soon. The term has derived via the impacts of multi-generational slavery and the inflictions involved amongst those who were subject to enslavement, leaving residue which has impacted the descendants of the African diaspora. These results stemmed from chattel slavery, a form of slavery which was predicated on the belief that African Americans were inherently or genetically inferior to whites. Inferior to whites. This was then followed by institutionalized racism, which continues to perpetuate injury, resulting in MAP. And this is what Corey was talking about now. So this is MAP, what was coined also through Dr. Joy DeGruy. So M means multi-generational trauma together with continued oppression, absence of opportunity to heal or access the benefits available in society, leading to P, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So these are the mitigating factors which lead us to be in this state of mind now. And this is one key evidence. Us now being acknowledging the fact that we are undergoing PTSS is at first identity crisis, feeling inferior, not knowing who we are, lack of empowerment. There's a lot of these things. If anything, I will do an actual presentation in this part again. And if anything, with all agreements, that you get to understand, so we can all, as a people, as a group, we can understand our diagnostics of ourselves, our mindset. So from there, with the diagnosis comes what? A healing process. So I definitely need to put this presentation up properly. And yeah, we'll go from there. So I just wanted to put that just to support what Corey was saying earlier about some of the symptoms of PTSS, what we're going through.
Okay,
now.
that's
that's
great.
it for me on that part.
Well, I've got something else I want to quickly show based on what we just actually it's funny enough just on that actually, what you've just mentioned.
Oh, I'll drop my screen now. Nice.
It's actually based on that post-traumatic. So. And so I think we've done some good work today, like going through some of this, well, more than some, going through some of the dynamics of this situation, which I think have been invaluable actually, because often we don't get to talk about it like this, nowhere near enough, and it's so crucial. From this conversation, it's obviously you can tell it's very crucial that we start having these discussions, because we literally seem like we're so we know what's happening. We know what's happening. We've been suffering it, but for some reason. We haven't did anything about it, and I think that some people would say that's Stockholm syndrome. Some people might call that ain't got no time syndrome. But whatever we call it, we can all agree that it's harmful to our children and to their development. And we're living in a society.
Carry on. Sorry, my bad.
No, you can't go. Go.
No, it's just based on what you said. Like when you give it a name, it's easy for us, especially with language here, we'll know how to reference it. And this is why I loved when you said racial fragility. That part there is like it actually. I'm therefore I need to talk to you about that, because it will help a lot with research now. That's a heavy coin. You might have to if this word, because you said I may call it that. So if you can coin it the same way Miss Roots have coined critical confidence, yeah, you can make that established, so it helps us even more. Do you know what I'm saying, bro? So yeah, when you give certain symptoms a name, it helps us a lot more rather than not knowing what it is.
Yeah, I think I agree. It allows us to think about it in context also, doesn't it?
Yep.
It allows us to give it context and be like, okay, yeah. When we're talking about this topic, we've got a way of reconciling and rationalizing what it is exactly we're describing. Because I think at the moment, most of what's happening is that we don't actually have a functioning way of describing what's happening to us.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I think
Yes.
I don't think that's by accident.
Right.
I really don't. I think that
No coincidence.
in order for us to be free, we have to know. We have to know the. We have to be aware of the circumstances of freedom. At the moment, you've got situations where many of us don't even feel like we've got a right to challenge these things. Many parents feel like they've got a right to challenge these things, and if they do, it may not be cost effective for them, or their children may suffer further, even, dare I say. And nobody really wants that. Nobody wants that.
These phrases and these points and these concepts have got to come from us, right? They've got to come from us. So, like Nathan's saying, you know, the coining of phrases or, you know, new ways of labeling things have got to come from people who have suffered it, the oppressed, or people who want to see the change. So it's no coincidence that, you know, we're able to kind of articulate it in a manner that nobody else could, right? Because as I say, it's got to come from us. One of the things that I want to state as well, and I'm going to put this comment up as I say it, is that we kind of touched on the fact that the transatlantic slave trade was not the only slavery that took place, and that slavery has occurred from the beginning of humanity. It's kind of what humans do to each other. Like, humans do that. We enslave each other. We always have. We always will, right? And wow, I say we always will. It'll look different. Like, there's a type of slavery that's taking place right now. Doesn't look like the transatlantic slave trade, but there's a lot of us, most of us.
Sorry, Corey. And with that as well, that's, I think, what Miss Root said. I think that needs to be done in our part 2 now, because we've got the base now, what we've done. And in our part 2, we need to talk about the slavery that, because remember, the one key thing that you said, Corey, was what does slavery look like today? It ain't the same. It's a different form. It's not the shackles anymore, you know. So that's it. And we need to really touch down on the current climate and deal with that. We can't change the past. We need to look at what's going on today and how we can now reform. You said the key word, reform. And what's the opposite word of reform? Adapt. We've been forced to adapt to the climate that we're in. Keyword, reform. How do we change it? Change the curriculum, educational system, the mindset, understanding identity. And that's the fast forward part. That's what we're trying to aim to. So I reckon the part 2 of this is getting into the current climate. So from then to now.
But even before the transatlantic slave trade,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Look at all those. Slavery,
put it up if you can. Put it up for me. The comments on there from Maurice Bay. So put it up. So we're talking about this before. The Mann Act.
Oh, the Mann Act.
Okay, so can you put it up straight away? I was aware of this before previously. So please know that this law was created in 1910.
Yeah.
So just to clarify that's only just over 113 years ago that this was an issue for so-called white people. And then it was obviously after that point, it was then adjusted, and they changed the name of that term. And so I've got it up here on Wikipedia also. And it goes through some of the process. I'm letting you know that. So it wasn't accidental at all. In fact, and let me just try and find now. Because
these are why the acts here started to, especially in America, yes, they start to incorporate amendments to the acts as well. It's mad, you know, you're saying that. And this is why in 2015 we got the modern day over in the UK, we got the modern day slave act which was in the recent one is 2015. So we have to look at these as well.
Can you see at the moment the Barbary Corsair as well?
Is that sorry, Asher, if you can put in the comments as well. Is this about the city or the place? Is it called Barbaria? So we're talking about, you know, Tartary and all that. Is it Barbaria where this was happening at these times for Barbary? I'm just looking at the name. It's just triggered me thinking about Barbaria. So Asher, is it related to that? Put it up if you can, because I'm gonna research it myself. I've already wrote it down anyway. Because this is something that
is he replying to that?
Yeah, but we've had this conversation as well, though, when we talked about the royal family sponsoring pirates to go on their voyages, right? So
Yeah. So I mean, so the idea of slavery is a lot. It's not exactly what we think it is, and that's part of the shame, really. 1 second. I'm trying to type it in. So, okay, the U.S. Navy created. Sorry, you see that comes up. Boom. Okay. Boom. Okay. So I've got this article up here too. So just to clarify, this is an article here. So this is not being taught.
That's right.
This is not being taught at all. And so
remember this. Is this Ottoman Empire in it around these times?
Well, yeah, it is around those times there. Yeah. But I think just to clarify, so 1910, that to bring a law in. The Barbary Corsairs War was a few hundred years before that. A few hundred years before that. And so the reason why I'm putting this content up now is because if we was to discuss these things, for example, in school, do we think that everybody would be happy about it? Do you think that, for example,
Europeans or the Englishmen would want their children to know that their ancestors were enslaved?
Exactly.
No? They like the fact, well, I shouldn't say they like, but as far as modern day mindset is, the only people who have ever been enslaved are those Africans that were right. So there's an issue there.
Yeah.
So pigeons as well.
And so I'm going to play from this part here, so you can see. This is from the BBC. Fair use. It's on the screen.
Yeah.
So this is this video here got uproar.
Okay.
Let me play you, and I'm going to play to the point. I'm going to show you why.
Yeah.
So notice that the boy of wealth is wearing white, gold, and a red cavalli.
Huh?
And if you look at his servant, he's got something around his neck. You can probably smash if you'll see it in a second.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You see?
Carly, I had it with me.
That's like Danny the dog.
And this is part here that really upset people.
In rich people's homes, slaves look after underfloor heating to keep out the chilly British weather. Now make sure my birthday invitations are all delivered today.
Shane Father will miss the party. Ouch! Look at me, Quintus. I'm Dad. I'm a Roman commander fighting those barbarians. My father's Focale.
And so I'm going to skip forward to when the file comes back.
Returned.
On.
Dad! He's just gone. I've looked after it really carefully.
Seems like I arrived just in time. Just what a man needs after working hard for the Roman Empire.
We need stuff like this on site. I'm not gonna lie,
and
like
so,
just to see the wide. Thanks for bringing this out, Corey. Appreciate this.
And so, like, there are levels to this. So I'm going to flick back to the point where, again, so we can just recap the part which caused all the uproar, and I'll stop at that point now.
In rich people's homes, slaves look after underfloor heating to keep out the chilly British weather.
Okay. And so, I'm not going to get into Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Or into other things there. No, but it's the truth, though. But like, and so the question should be is that, well, when parents are in outrage about this kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, well, their impact, what they're talking about is often very justified. If you teach my child this in school, they're going to be sad. Just forget about everything else, all the other complexity of emotions, they're going to be sad. And we know that sad children do not learn very well. But yet, they're going to have those ships being portrayed where there's 700 on there, and they say that they're weeing and pooping on themselves. And we've just been like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. That's exactly how it was. And we're not taking into account other things that were happening. So back to this point here. And then bearing in mind, this is a very important part of slavery also. And this was up until past 1910, technically, up until 1910. Bearing in mind that the First World War happened in 1935, was it? So arguably, a few decades before the First World War, there was an issue.
Right.
We have to ask ourselves what contributed towards that war in the first place. And then to top it off, I'm going to go back to. I'm going to go to this here, which is this is about the sheep people. I'm going to go to Britannica. Actually, fact. Oh, there you go. I spelled it wrong. These are the people that were found in this part of the world.
Right.
So when Chief Amrushi mentioned earlier on about the locks, this is another picture to show you how big it is. And this stone here, a lot of them are carved from stone so hard that it's almost impossible, very improbable that basic technology could have done that.
Right.
The rock was like some of the maybe the quartz or basalt that could be used in the pyramids in Egypt at the moment. They weren't messing around, and the likeness from these statues and the sheer size and the weight, and they're still here today. The statues are still here today, and there is no arguing about the phenotype of these people. Yes, there are varying phenotypes also, but it is undeniable.
Yeah.
Undeniable. And I'm trying to find one here with the hair, because some of them are put in, because some of them you can actually see the hairstyle. Okay, bam, there it is. The braids.
Mm-hmm.
The braids. And so we really need to sort of reevaluate the propaganda that was fed to us that no other race of people would accept or justify. No other race would accept or justify. Yet we've allowed this trauma to go on our children unchecked. And so I was going to quickly recap that this is as relevant as any form of slavery that we could talk about. I would say as relevant. Where is it? And this here is just as relevant to this here and this here. The fact that they changed the name of it. And look, so just to clarify, the Mann Act previously called the White Slave Traffic Act. The fact that they even changed the name should show the level of concealment that's gone into it. So we're not going to talk about our situation, but we'll talk about yours. Yeah, and then we're not going to include the, oh gosh, guess what? These people were already there. And and the sad thing is that a lot of this really is on us.
Yes, it is. And I'm glad you said that, because I'm always going to take it back to who has responsibility, who's allowing it to happen. Right. So we're in this time where we can take back control and power of the narrative. We should, hence why we are promoting this notion of taking a critical look at slavery, because we can now, and we can also begin to challenge curriculum and discuss what is it our children are learning at school, and do we want them in these places where, this kind of curriculum is being delivered?
Yeah.
As we know, this is detrimental to your child's growth. You are stunting their spiritual, physical, mental, which may even affect their physical development. Like, this is very, very real. Yeah.
And it can be measured as well. And the thing is that, like you mentioned before, about how these things have been done to us. Like, there's two things. They've told us about all this horrific and brutality, but not providing any resolution.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it's also propagandized as well. And so the real question should be is that, but there a minute, if this has happened, surely you're aware. Oh, is it gone? Is it that's me?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna. I don't know what you're about to do there. We're gonna have to watch the time. I just thought, would you just define
It's
it?
only a couple of seconds. It's only a couple of seconds, just about some of the descriptions about that and the law. So I'll go through it right now. So as you can see, second. I've only let me go through. If I try and play it, can you see that still?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to go through all of it in very context, but basically, this is some description about what's been happening about disclosing assault, rape, or dehumanization of a family member or ancestor. And these are sort of some of the things that it kind of generically would fall into, and that's emotional manipulation, gaslighting, guilt tripping, intimidation, and exploitation. Some of the other aspects it falls into is like verbal abuse, isolation, gaslighting again, threats, and withholding affection. And nothing withholding affection. Well, when they're teaching only the abusive aspects of it and not providing any support emotionally afterwards, so they'll expose people to those kind of shifts in that narrative. Yeah, they'll embarrass them, put them under shame, and then after that, they'll be like, "Oh, go on with your lesson." No therapy, no counselling. And these are some of the laws which will sort of describe some of the things that are happening to our children. Okay, these are some of the laws that cover that. And so, as you can see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like there are 8 laws there which potentially could be used as a means of challenging the narrative and essentially encouraging, if not forcing, change. And so, when we think about what can be done, there is so much that we can do. We just don't know it, it seems. That's really the situation. We just don't know it. But the reality is actually that these laws here cover quite a few things. And don't get me wrong, the law's a bit broad in some areas. But if you look at the first one, it's causing distress. Okay? And it's mentioned, it's talking also emotional abuse. And if you look at every single one there, every single one of those laws will cover an aspect that people are experiencing in the classroom and have been for decades. And I think what we need to really do is just map these out to the events that are happening and then say, okay, well, either you're going to provide additional content. We can probably bring this down now if you want to.
Yeah. Or we're going to provide us with means so that we can cater for ourselves or allow us to deliver a curriculum that's conducive and opposes all of this, or and so forth. It's just about taking your power back, like you say. But people need that critical confidence. That's what we're missing. People at the moment are just walking in blind, walking in like sheep. They don't realize actually what is going on, and I think that is the issue.
I mean,
Corey,
who would have thought that?
Again,
what's happening to my children?
Sorry, I have to interject before you say anything.
Go on. Go.
Before you say anything else, you smashed it just now, because you've actually skipped and got the legislations about how to kind of, we're talking about the therapy healing part, like, we can use these acts and laws and things that's been put into place to be able to manage the situation that's going. They did that obviously, now stemming from when you talked about the Mann Act, they did that obviously to be more lenient. So going from the heavy slavery, the forced servitude to you've got rights now. These are where the acts are put into play. Now, do you know the symptoms that you're talking about? So you've actually skipped it now. You've actually gone a step ahead with solutions, possible solutions. Dr. Joy DeGroy, she coined a thing called vacant esteem. Actually, it wasn't just her, a few psychologists, but the thing called vacant esteem, which was focused around PTSS. And just to have a quick read, I know we're on time here. Just it's on one of my slides.
About 5 minutes if you're going to push it. We have to cut the
I know, my bad. Just have a quick read. I'm blaming you for this.
We could make a series out of these things, like maybe like each one have the type of like a series.
I know. It's a smash. This is. No, you've. Can you see that? I've just put it up there now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So it's
there.
loading.
I can see it on my end. There's a slide that's there on my page. It's just something that but that's what I'm saying. There's actually terms for these things. And this is the one thing, the situation that we're in. I wait for it to come up on my end as well. It's called vacant esteem. So
yeah, we got it.
So I'm going to read it real quick. So other than the similarities between PTSD, So PTSD is post-traumatic stress syndrome and that. And there's a difference between that and that. There's still the same diagnostics. So there's the difference between PTSD and PTSS is the fact that PTSS is focused on our people. All right. So Dr. Groy elaborated more on the part identified as vacant esteem, where effects became more exclusive to PTSS. One of these things is marked propensity for anger and violence. You know, when we feel depressed and we got the anger kind of thing. You know, we feel like we need to expel. What's the word? Feeling distraught. It's not. Go on.
We need to have a show because I was watching an interview from a psychologist, and she was saying that black men tell her, "If you're going in my head, don't mess with my anger." I'm not even joking. This is like a black girl. Like she was saying, but we need to help heal. And it's like, listen, black men. This is in the US. We're saying, whatever you do, you can go in my head if you want to, because you're in a therapy class, but don't mess with my anger. I need my anger. They were saying, I need my anger. I was thinking, that's really interesting. Now, of course, anger has a purpose, but to hold on to it would cause more trauma in the long run than good. We're supposed to experience it at the time, and then that energy should be channeled into a solution.
Yeah.
Not bottled up and built up and accumulated.
There's a movie about that.
Okay, yeah. So that there, like we said, we need a bit more. I mean, at least I never show on that, because that's a thing where people feel like, well, my anger's got me through this.
Yeah.
I was angry about what they said they'd done to us, and then that anger was my motivation to get certain actions done. And I think that so much of our community have been driven by anger. It's ridiculous.
It's interesting, you know, because a strategy that I've used even with my children, like when they were naughty, or I shouldn't say the word naughty, right? But I'd say, go on, get mad, get mad then. Because when they do get mad, then they come up with and then they come up with a solution, like you say, like they come up with the next stage, the next thing that they need to do once they've calmed down, or allow that anger to make them come up with something that they need to do next, right? Yeah. And I even do that a lot. If something gets me angry enough, then it causes me to find a solution, like what's going on in the education system. Yeah. It angers me to a stage where I better do something about it. I hope this is making sense. So this is where you can channel your anger into something positive.
Matilda,
it does,
and you know, like pretty much all the X-Men, like they tap into their emotion, like Magneto, for example. They tap into their emotion in order to bring out their talents.
Right.
And so there's definitely something in that. And so that's something that we should be able to, that should be a practice in itself.
Right. On many levels. Gives you extra muscle. Gives you and not just muscle.
It's one thing. Yeah.
But it can galvanize.
Yeah, it's known as basically challenging that, channeling the energy in it.
Yeah. And transmuting it like alchemy into something that's going to be productive for you afterwards. That's the real key. What happens, I think, a lot with people, unfortunately, this day and age, is that they kind of get trapped in it because they come with people, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And some people find creative solutions, but in many cases, rather than find a solution through the situation, they tend to sidestep it. Not in every situation in life, but regarding what we're talking about now, regarding the exposure to certain ideas that are causing trauma to our children, a lot of people feel disempowered and have gone through it themselves. And so we're now coming up with actually something we can show that these elements are causing this trauma in our children. They're creating PTSS in these lessons.
Right.
And if we wanted to, obviously I'm all peace, but if you wanted to, we could hold them accountable.
Yeah, when you know you're right, you can hold them accountable, because, as you say, there's injustice here.
Yeah,
this is discrimination. Like, this is actually not really positively conducive to any student. That their history lies within that context, the narrative that is spewing out. So
exactly,
it's an interesting.
It actually is really interesting. I think, like I said, we've touched on some really amazing points, and also I think we've got some solutions already in mind for anybody that's watching. There are definitely things that we can do. There definitely are things we can do. There always is. Again, you've just got to be able to do that bit of alchemy and then transmute that hate or that anger or that rage, whatever you've got, and channel it into something that's okay. It's going to be a solution for you in the now and in the future, in the long term. And so what I'm kind of proposing at the moment is that we use all of that tension, that frustration that we've had for all those decades of our history being mismatched, washed out, misrepresented, harmful to us. And then we use that energy to present a history which is just as empowering to us as it is for all the other people that are represented.
And I feel if we don't do that, then we're still in a form of enslavement.
Well, yeah, we're enabling the enslavement of our next generations mentally. It's another mental enslavement where, because of the trauma bonding, the greatest element of their heritage will be those events.
Facts.
It causes, and how our brain records memories as well. It records memories based on fear and cause on distress. The things that are most distressful in our life, we tend to remember more than many good things. And so when you're in that class and they're like ashamed and embarrassed, demoralized and devalued, they're like, it's terrible. It's like, it's not, it's generally it's unethical even. Yeah. And I know that a lot of teachers also agree with it too, but they feel like we've got to go through it. And then I think because in their culture, like, well, they're not feeling it directly. They can tell it's bad, but they feel like, well, if I don't do it, am I doing the people that is justice then most of the time? Because they're Black people and they want to learn their history. And I think at some point, I think if there was, because we often find that when there's a person of color teaching it, they put that a bit of spice to it, add a bit of extra flavor, a bit of extra color, and the lesson may be done, like with yourself, Miss Roots, in a slightly different format, which the people can then discuss openly. And that open discussion allows for reconciliation, resolutions, and to quantify what's been happening in actually a palatable manner, which is not then degrading to them or discriminating. Because, like I said, we've already acknowledged that if they taught only white slavery in schools, there'd be uproar.
That's right.
There would be uproar. And so it's time for change.
It is time for change, and that's what we're here for.
I love that. That's a nice
Let's
way
wrap
to,
this up now then, because, you know, and I've said it before, we can talk for 24 hours, you know. I'm sure we'll do it again. Definitely think we need to follow up.
You guys down for sorry guys, are you down to do part 2 next week, so we're still in the notion, so we don't leave it hanging like a heavy cliffhanger on this, and we just do like
I am. Up to you. I'm cool if everybody else is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm cool, but let's discuss it see if there's anything else that we want to cover, but we could follow this up straight away, see how we feel. But I think we've done enough to at least trigger the critical mindsets, the critical thinking, which is ultimately our philosophy, isn't it? When we come here, we don't know it all, but we do know how to at least get people thinking, talking, create a bit of content, put it out there. Whoever connects with it, connects with it. Whoever wants to follow up on what we said, they'll follow up, right? So we've done our bit for society, and And it's us as well. We're still learning, we're still building our knowledge and trying to work out what this thing is and what we can do. So yeah, I think we did a decent job this evening.
Yes.
I enjoyed, I mean, this, people are bored of talking about slavery, they're bored of the movies, they're bored of, it's just constant slavery content, isn't it? But I think we've done something quite different this evening, which is challenge what's been put out there, challenge the curriculum, and even kind of let people know that there were different types of slavery. There was a white slavery, and we didn't even touch on the Arabs in Africa, right? And
and there's
gosh,
there's
That's what I'm
so
saying. We definitely need to touch down. Asha, you said about group chat. Are you talking about? I'm not sure what you meant by group chat, like now, later, this and that.
So Asha, if you're interested, we meet privately as well. So not online, not live. If ever you wanted to join us, it's actually more intense than what we do online. We actually kind of hold back a little bit. But we go ham when we're behind the scenes, right?
As far as the winds can spread.
If you want to be part of that, Asha, let me know. Here's our email. Email us and I'll send you over private contact details, and you can get hold of us. Contact on route23.com if you want to join us behind the scenes. Yeah. Oh, who's this? Butters Basic Instinct Show. Wow. Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to you as well. We're about to close down. Yeah, I was about to say lock up. I'm so comfortable. Go on, Miss Roots. Explain. Sorry.
And if you're interested, email us on contact@onroute23.com, or you can get hold of us on the socials. So it's on Route 23 across all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, although we ain't got much content on there, or Twitter. And YouTube, of course. Yeah.
As well.
So for the lives, we're here most Sundays. Yeah. So we do live chats then. But if you want to get involved behind the scenes, email us and we'll add you to our private meetings that we do, where we've got lots of things planning. We've got lots of ideas on how we can create change. We're just here for the talk, but we're doing some things to create change and to follow up with pragmatic. Yeah. Butters, I know that name. Say Asha, should I say? Yeah. So it's all good. Bless up to you also. Bliss. So that's beautiful to see that we're joining more people. We are about to wrap up now, though. We've been on for almost 2.5 hours. Oh, you're from Clubhouse. See, that's one thing we haven't done, isn't it, my brothers? We don't do the Clubhouse. Maybe that's something we should do, bro. So I don't know. I'm Android, not iPhone, so that's why I don't really know much about Clubhouse. But let's talk about that. Yeah. Okay. So any last words before we end this stream?
Thank you.
Thank you guys. It was a great show. Again, it was critically engaging, thought-provoking, and insightful, which is what we hope to do. So.
Brilliant.
I love it, guys. And again, thank you for all those that's bringing good contributions, even raising our critical confidence. It's a reciprocal thing. So again, if we can keep this notion going throughout, even external to each Sunday sessions, even throughout the week, guys, just tap into us even throughout the week. Give us ideas of things that we can talk about to even continue with the research. Obviously, subscribe to our site if you have not yet already on all the platforms, and that's it. And again, thank you so much.
Beautiful. I just want to end by saying thank you to Nathan and Courtney. For always, doing your bit behind the scenes and creating some content for the platform. I'm really grateful that we're able to work in this way. I look forward to producing more, and I want to thank everybody else that has engaged via the live chat. Asha, that other person, is it Quartz Israel, or that person that was engaging earlier, and
Kazak. His actual name is Kazak. Yeah, his name.
Right, so that was some valuable comments there.
Yeah, I know who he is as well. We're close guys as well. I'll get him to join.
Brilliant. So all of it just enriches the content, you know, so people feeding in that way. Hopefully, you know, we can get people on screen with us in the future. That would make it even more spicy and engaging. So yeah, until next week, I want to say I hope you have a good week, everybody. Look after yourselves and each other, and I'm ready to end it there. Yeah.
No worries. Bye-bye. Water.
On that note, take care, everybody.